Island-wide breakdown in the supply of electricity. Minister appoints a committee to investigate the incident. Breakdown in power disrupts supply of water. Bengamue Nalakathero requests for cannabis cultivation to produce indigenous medicine be permitted.
ඉතින් ඒ කංශ වගාවත් ලියාපදිංචි කරලා බලපත්‍රය ඇතුව එහෙම කරන්න වැඩ පිළිවෙලක් හදනවා නම් ඒකත් හරි වටිනවා.
Kurunegala Municipal Council allocates 2.1 million rupees for legal fees of the archaeological site destruction case.
Hello there and a very good evening. You're watching Primetime News on Election First. For the News First team, I'm Dasni Athada. Starting off with your top story tonight. Now, as all of you are aware, Sri Lankans across the country experienced an island-wide power outage as of this morning. Now, this severely inconvenienced all Sri Lankans living across 9 provinces and 25 districts, both at home and at work at that time. So this power outage also resulted in a disruption of the supply of water as well as the faltering of traffic lights. To understand what exactly happened, we are now joined by Newsfirst Tarusha Kumarasinghe.
Thank you very much, Dasuni. Earlier on in the day, we saw how the entire country was experienced a blackout, and the power was disrupted to the entire nation. Approximately around 12:35 this noon, this power outage was experienced, and according to the Ceylon Electricity Board, as a result of all the places, all the grids that generate electricity to the entire country, as a result of them failing, as a result of a malfunction, this entire power outage, we experienced that in the country today. And the Ceylon Electricity Board further reported that this situation rose in 2016 as well due to the same reasons. And the situation at hand is that power is being restored in the country. As we've been told by the authorities, 75% of power is being restored in the country. Several other areas still do not have power, and because of that, this primetime news at 9 tonight on Election First is being broadcast on News First social media platforms as well. After this power breakdown, the next biggest challenge that we faced was the restriction of the water supply. Now, it is reported to us that the water supply in some areas is being restricted to some extent, and some other areas is experiencing a low pressure water supply. Now, amidst all of this, taking a look at the big picture about the power the disruption of power supply in the country, News First got in touch with the chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board later on this tonight.
At around 12:30 this afternoon, the breakdown was first reported at the grid substation in Kerawalapitiya. It is thought this substation that power is supplied to the 300 megawatt power plant in Kerawalapitiya. This substation also provides power to the 900 megawatt power plant in Norotchore to a certain extent. With the breakdown at the substation, the national grid has been severely affected. As a result, we attempted to generate the same capacity of power via other power plants. As a result, the trip switch of those power plants went off, resulting in an all-island power failure. The last time we experienced an island-wide power failure was in 2016. Back in 2016, the power failure took place at around 2 in the afternoon, and we were able to restore power only at around 8 in the evening. Our staff members are working hard to address this issue. The process is such that we first try and connect one power plant to the national grid. During this process, we may experience more power failures. As of now, about 75% has been restored. Power has been restored in several areas including Colombo, the southern province and Kurunegala. We believe we can restore power across the country in a few hours.
එකම අපි නිරන්තරයෙන්ම දකින දෙයක් තමයි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මෙවැනි බිඳවැටීම් ඉතිහාසයේ ඉඳලා වෙනවා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මෙහෙම බිඳවැටීමක් සිදු වුණායන් පසුව මේ ජනන ක්‍රියාවලිය සමග එකතු කරන්න අපට විකල්පයක් නැද්ද? සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි සතුව විශේෂයෙන්ම කැලණි තිස්ස හරහා හෝ වෙන විකල්පයක් හරහා මේ තත්වය මගහරවා ගන්නට අවස්ථාවක් නැද්ද?
අතරම මේක බලාගාරවල බිඳවැටීමට වැඩිය
This is more a failure in the system rather than the power plants. The entire system has dysfunction due to its inability to bear the capacity. As a result, we cannot connect to the national grid. This breakdown was because there was a failure in the power plant. This is a breakdown in the system. We will take some time to resolve this issue. However, we must look into the reason for this issue. We must look into it and try our best to prevent such issues from taking place in the future.
That was Vijitha Hera, the chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board. Now, to give us some more insight as to what happened earlier on in the day to all Sri Lankans, we are now joined by Newsfirst's very own Shalan Benedict. Shalan, just guide us through from the minute that we lost power up until now. What really happened?
Well, the general public is quite aware of what happened since then. We've not had power since then, and currently we're in the process or the country, the electricity, the authorities are in the process of restoring power. And as you quite rightly mentioned, according to the Ceylon Electricity Board, that process is about 75% complete right now. But of course, previously you mentioned that the last time we had an island-wide blackout was
in 2016.
In the year 2016. But there is a little bit of a correction there, because it was not one instance in the year 2016 that we had an island-wide power cut. It was twice. And that is what really brought this issue of or the power crisis into the forefront of the discussion here in Sri Lanka. Now, even before, in 2016, the two times that we experienced an island-wide power cut was on the 25th of February the 1st and the 13th of March, both in the year 2016. Even before that, on the 9th of October 2009 and the 27th of September 2015 too, Sri Lanka experienced similar island-wide power cuts. Now, a number of important facts were uncovered when the two power cuts in the year 2016 were experienced in Sri Lanka. People started asking questions, why are we having such massive power cuts in Sri Lanka? And a committee was appointed to investigate the incident and come up with recommendations. Now, there are about 1,000 engineers employed at the Ceylon Electricity Board. There are ancillary staff as well employed at the Ceylon Electricity Board, and their duties, simply put, are twofold: power generation and power transmission. These are the two main duties that are entrusted with the engineers and the other staff at the Ceylon Electricity Board. Now, the issue of blackouts or island-wide blackouts was, as I mentioned before, broadly discussed in the year 2016, and now, ironically, this issue 4 years later has cropped up again, even against a backdrop where a committee has already investigated the matter and provided recommendations. Now, there is another issue that we really need to identify. Besides the generation and transmission of this electricity, maintenance of these massive power plants is also another key area. Now, as Vindana, our reporter, was speaking with the chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board, he mentioned about the Kalanithissa power plant. Now, the Kalanithissa power plant was built so that it can supply Sri Lanka or the entire country with 500 megawatts of power at any given time during an emergency, especially during the war times there was terrorism. So this was built as a solution for that, and at that time, the Kalanithissa power plant had the capacity of 500 megawatts to supply Sri Lanka with power at any given time. However, the situation has changed now. Now, according to internal sources, the power plant cannot really supply the same volume of power. Also, we were speaking about the Norochole power plant. The chairman of the electricity board spoke about the Norochole power plant. Now, the Norochole power plant supplies 900 megawatts already to the national grid, and there are proposals to construct another 300 megawatt power plant in the Norochole power plant itself. Now, the viability of all of these options have been questioned now and again, especially with the Norochole power plant failing to provide power in the recent past on a number of occasions, and a massive amount of money, time and effort being put into restarting the Norochole power plant anytime that it fails. So the options that are on the table of building another 300 megawatt power plant at Norochole was also questioned by professionals in the field, by the trade unions, and so on and so forth, various factions.
Shalan, just let me interrupt you right there. As you rightly pointed out, this has been happening. You pointed out the issues and the various problems that we faced through the years, and this has happened, according to you, in 2016 twice. Is it because the Ceylon Electricity Board and the authorities in Sri Lanka doesn't have a long-term plan for this power crisis that we are facing?
I don't want to make statements regarding that, but of course the facts of the issue do point to that conclusion. And to add to that, a little bit of more evidence. Now, the committee that reviewed this issue in 2016 presented recommendations and a report. Now, there are questions as to why such an incident would occur again against a backdrop where the committee has already provided recommendations. Have these recommendations really been implemented? And as far as the question you posed to me regarding the long-term plan of the Ceylon Electricity Board, for our viewers of News First and our news bulletins, we have covered this subject time and time again. The power crisis in Sri Lanka, as it has come to be known in Sri Lanka. The long-term electricity plan that was put forward for Sri Lanka has not even been followed. There were issues that cropped up because of this power generation plan not being followed by the relevant officials, and this was discussed broadly, and officials actually openly in certain instances admitted the fact that this power generation plan has not been followed.
Something that came to the fore when it comes to power in Sri Lanka and when it comes to emergency situations such as this is emergency purchase of power, Charlene.
Of course, the word emergency purchase of power suggests, at least in the formation of the word, the juxtaposition of the word, that there has to be a certain emergency. But ironically, if we look at the past as to when power was purchased under the guise of purchasing emergency power, there has not really been an emergency. Of course, before we get into that, just one more thing I need to add to the fact that the long-term power generation plan of Sri Lanka was not followed. As many countries have taken a turn towards green energy, Sri Lanka too was optimistic in putting this down into the policy of Sri Lanka's power generation and moving forward. And as a result of that, there was a wind power plant that was constructed close to the Norachole power plant. Now, this power plant had a capacity of about 60 megawatts. And for a considerable period of time, the authorities, the responsible authorities, have failed to incorporate this power plant into the national grid. Now again, as I said before, I do not want to be making statements, but these evidence, these bits and pieces clearly point out to the conclusion that the long-term power generation plan of Sri Lanka has not been adhered to. And the question you raised regarding emergency power, now again, as I said before, there is a question as to if we can really call this emergency power. And on top of all that, the real problem here is the losses that are being caused to Sri Lanka, because as you would know, emergency power comes at a serious cost. It is extremely exorbitant and it costs way more than the production cost of power incurred by the Ceylon Electricity Board. And of course, when we speak about losses that the country has suffered right now, of course, besides the losses suffered by the COVID-19 pandemic, there are really two ways that the country really lost out in economic terms. One is the loss that has been incurred by the economy due to the power outage across the island. Now, as you know, many businesses, workshops, places of work, simple businesses, sole proprietorships, they were all shut down or driven to a halt, especially in these trying times because of this island-wide blackout, and that caused a considerable amount of loss to the economy of Sri Lanka. And coming back to the point of emergency power purchases again, now there seems to be again a need to purchase emergency power, and what happens then really is that through the purchase of emergency power, Sri Lanka really loses out on a lot of suffers a huge loss, because at the end of the day, it is the general public that has to foot the bill, the exorbitant bill that comes with the generation of emergency power. Now, of course, we just came out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in such a backdrop, there is a new government that has been appointed. The minister just took oaths today, and so this is a really trying time for Sri Lanka, and to have such a massive blackout in Sri Lanka at a time like this really affected the country, and those are the feedbacks that we get
And
from
also,
the general public as well.
this power outage that we experienced today, the loss incurred to the country has also has to be calculated, Charlotte.
Of course, and besides the loss, it's really, we need to look into the issue, the reason behind the power outage. Now, according to the Ceylon Electricity Board, this was caused in the Kerawalapitiya, power plant in Kerawalapitiya, and the transmission system had fallen down. But now the main focus on the report also that was presented following the 2016 power outage was the reason. And if a similar incident has repeated itself today, I go back to the initial point that I was trying to make. Has the recommendations of the committee then been implemented? And if they were implemented, how did the same thing happen again? How can there be a repeat? Of course, we were speaking about the impact that this power outage had on the people of the country. And instead of us standing here and discussing about what kind of an impact and how massive this impact is, it's best if the people of this country hear it from the people who suffered it themselves.
Charlotte, right now,
හරි වැඩේ දැන් අද දෙක තුන වෙද්දි දෙන්නත් ඕනේ. දැන් වැඩේ කරගන්න බැරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. මොනවා කරන්නද කියලා හිතා ගන්න ඕනේ දැන්.
දෙන්න ඕනේ ඒවා දෙන්න අමාරු ඉස්කෝලේ ළමයින්ගේ ඒවා එහෙම ලොකු ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේක. මම හිතන්නේ ලංකාවටම ගියා කියන ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට හදා ගන්න බෑනේ.
කොහොමද වැඩ කරන්නේ? මේ දානවා වතුර නැහැ. එහෙම වතුරක් නැහැ. ඒක කොහොම එකවත් වතුර නැහැ.
අතවසෙම මේ අපි කාලේ නගරවාසියෙක් හැටියට අපිට ගිය සෙන්සුරාදාත් පැය 7ක් 8ක් පමණ ලයිට් නැති වුණා. විදුලිය ඇනේට තිබුණා. දැන්ටත් පැය එකමාර දෙකකට කිට් වෙන අදත් විදුලිය නැහැ. අපේ ව්‍යාපාර කරගන්න විදියක් නැහැ. අයියෝ මහත්තයෝ වැඩ කරන්න විදියක් නැහැ. වාහන දැන් 7-8ක් ඇවිල්ලා දැන් මේ උලං ගහන්න පැත් දාන්න මොනවත් කරන්න විදියක් නැහැ. දැන් කරන්ට් එක නැහැ දැන් පැය 3-4ක් වෙලා ඉඳන්. අපි මේ නිකන් ඉඳගෙන ඉන්නවා. දැන් අපිට හම්බෙන පඩියත් ඉතින් අඩු වෙනවා. මේ මොකොත් මේ කරගන්න විදියක් නැහැ.
නිකන් මේ වතුර බේරෙනවා අයිස් බේරෙනවා. කොහොමද කරන්න කියන්නේ මේවා කන්නේ කොහොමද කියන්නකෝ. ඉතින් ඒක මේක තමයි තත්ත්වය. මේ මාළු කෑල්ලක් ගන්න කියලා කඩේට ආවේ. හරි? මේ මාළු ගෙනියන්නේ කොහොමද? පොඩ්ඩක්වත් අයිස් නැහැ. හරි? වතුර බේරෙනවා. නිකන් කුණු වෙලා වගේ. ඉතින් මේ මුදලාල්ලා කියනවා මේ මෙහෙමයි කප්ලි කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. කරන්ට් එක නැහැ. කරන්ට් නැතුව කොහොමද මේ අයිස් තියාගන්නේ එහෙම කියලා.
That is what the general public had to say about this blackout we faced earlier on in the day. Now, these views were expressed by the chairman of the General Workers Union of the Ceylon Electricity Board, Malika Wickramasinghe.
There has been an island-wide blackout in the country. This is the biggest damage that can be caused in the power generation sector. I believe that as the General Workers Union of the CEB and the collective trade unions, if the power supply to the entire country breaks down due to a technical glitch at one location, there is a serious issue in the transmission system. Especially, we know that the CEB established a transmission center in Palavatta, Battaramulla. They spent billions of rupees for that. The operation center was established and was staffed with engineers and ES officials. As far as we know, there are no ES officers at that operation center. When there is a transmission center that was constructed at the cost of billions and billions of rupees, if the power supply to the entire country breaks down on a single technical glitch, there is a serious problem that must be looked into.
සම්පූර්ණම රටේ විදුලිය විසන්ධි වෙනවා නම් ඒක බරපතල ප්‍රශ්නයක්.
Now, earlier on in the day, Newsfirst's cameras were able to record the footage of the situation that occurred near the fueling stations, where large queues were seen, large lines were seen at fueling stations because of the breakdown of the fueling pumps. And also, we witnessed how the signal lights on the roads suffered breakdowns as well. Shalan, my question to you next up, we have seen in countries like Japan, when something of this importance, when something of this magnitude happens, the authorities, people who are responsible, they retire. But what is the situation in Sri Lanka?
Of course, I'll take that as a rhetorical question because the answer is quite obvious. That is the culture in Japan. That is how they express their accountability to their citizens. That is how state officials, people who are fed and they live by the taxpayers' money, respond to incidents like this. Not just an island-wide blackout, this is a massive incident in the country. Even if a train is delayed for a few minutes, Japanese officials or in those countries, the officials apologize, they even at sometimes retire, as you quite rightly mentioned. But here in Sri Lanka, the culture is not the same. However, it is not without hope, because as a developing country, Sri Lanka has kept on evolving throughout the years, and we need to look at these events in a positive outlook. Of course, there has been a new government that has been elected to power, with a massive mandate from the General Public of Sri Lanka. A new minister has taken oaths at the Ministry of Power. There is a new secretary. This all paves the way for these newly elected officials to really prove themselves and to conduct an unbiased investigation into what really happened here. Now, back again in 2016, the investigations that were conducted also focused on the security aspect of these power plants, because there were questions as to if the power outages were orchestrated by certain factions. Now, this, of course, the current situation in our country allows the minister, the secretary, and the relevant officials to conduct an unbiased investigation, not only into the incidents that occurred today and the reason behind it, but of course, matters that should be looked into was why, when this same incident occurred in 2016 and even before that, twice in 2016, why weren't the recommendations of these committees implemented? Why wasn't the long-term power generation plan for Sri Lanka implemented by the relevant officials? And if it was in some way implemented, why was there a failure of power today? Of course, these newly elected officials can focus their attention on all of these matters. And again, while giving the general public of Sri Lanka an answer as to why this happened, and giving an assurance to the general public of Sri Lanka that such a thing would not happen again, they could also bring to book those responsible for these incidents happening today, either directly or indirectly.
Shalan, you spoke about the irregularities that occurred in the previous committee that was appointed and the lapses of some of the lapses in some of their decisions. Now, speaking to News First earlier on this evening was the newly appointed Minister of Power, Dala Salahaperuma. He said that another committee will be appointed to look into this matter, and this is what he said. Let's take a look.
According to the engineering department, I believe the power situation all island will be restored in a few hours. I've also instructed the secretary to the Ministry of Power to appoint a special committee to look into this matter. We have convened a meeting with them tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning. This committee will look into this matter and hand over their observations within a week. We believe this is not sabotage. The public has been inconvenienced. Some areas do not have water as well. I apologize for the situation.
Shalan, just before we wrap up, I think we as a responsible media institution should have something to say to the people and to the authorities who are responsible for this massive crisis that we witnessed today.
Of course, Tarisha, we have been reporting on this matter since it happened at around 12:30 this afternoon, and we will continue to report on the progress that is made by these committees that have been appointed. What were the recommendations? What are the recommendations that are made by these committees that are appointed? And what is the progress of events that will unfold from today with regard to this massive national issue that has cropped up in the country. Of course, the general public, again, as I pointed out, has voted in a new government, and the general public wants accountability, as any nation, from any government, and we can only hope and pray and, of course, assist the authorities in bringing the people who were responsible for these issues to book, as well as ensuring the general public of the country that nothing like this will happen in the near future again.
Thank you, Shalan. I hope it was a fruitful discussion. It's back to Dasuni with more news from here at home. Dasuni.
Thank you for that, Shalan and Tharusha. Now moving on to more local news. Many ministers assumed duties of their respective ministries today as well. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa assumed duties of the Minister of Finance, Buddhasasana, Religious and Cultural Affairs, Urban Development and Housing. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa arrived at the Ministry of Finance this morning, and he was greeted by the Secretary to the Ministry, S.R. Artigala. After engaging in multi-religious activities, the Prime Minister assumed duties as the Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. W.D. Lakshman handed over a memento to the Prime Minister at the occasion as well. Thereafter, Prime Minister assumed duties as the Minister of Buddhasasana, Religious and Cultural Affairs at Gangarama Temple in Hunupitiya. Vidura Vikramanayake took office as the State Minister of National Heritage, Performing Arts and Rural Skills Promotion at this occasion as well. Thereafter, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa assumed duties as the Minister of Urban Development and Housing.
We made Colombo the fastest developed city in Asia back in 2015. We take office with a huge lapse of development in the past 5 years. You have a huge task ahead of you. You have the responsibility of bringing back the same situation that was there in 2015 and to take us beyond that.
Chamal Rajapaksa also assumed duties at his ministry today. Ministers Namal Rajapaksa and Shashindra Rajapaksa attended the event where Chamal Rajapaksa assumed duties at the Ministry of Irrigation this morning.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa has presented his policy statement. Recently, when ministers were sworn in, he included the duties of the ministers in the Gazette itself so that the ministers must perform them. Even the state ministers cannot make excuses, saying that the minister had not assigned any duties to them. Everyone has been informed of their exact duties. My duties are very simple. I have to oversee if they are working or not. The Mahaweli Authority is a large body. There are land issues that must be solved, issues surrounding the production of food in the country, and issues of fishermen. There is also a lot of work to be done in the towns.
ශාල වැඩ කොටසක් තියෙනවා. මම හිතන්නේ මහවැලි අධිකාරියට රටේ ඉස්සරහට තව ගැසට් කරොත් මුළු රටෙන් ඊළාම් ලබා ගත්තා වගේම තමයි.
Meanwhile, Anuruddha Jayaratna assumed duties as the State Minister of Development of Rural Paddy Fields and Associated Tanks, Reservoirs and Irrigation, and Siripala Gamlat assumed duties as the State Minister of Development of Common Infrastructure Facilities of Settlements and Canals in the Mahaweli zones. Meanwhile, Chamal Rajapaksa also assumed duties in his office as the State Minister of Internal Security, Home Affairs and Disaster Management.
I am happy there is no air conditioning here at this time. We should not be working in air-conditioned rooms. Even the police, we don't have a good reputation. We have a lot of officers who work extremely well. At times they are missed out on when we do our performance evaluations. We must pay attention to that as well, because if we work with commitment, it will not be difficult to solve the people's problems.
President's Counsel Ali Sabri, who assumed duties in his new role as Justice Minister, stated that he will put forward his course of action after taking 2 weeks to evaluate the current situation.
As a lawyer for over 25 years, I have seen the difficulty people of this country go through. If the case is filed over a property, it takes 25 or 30 years. If there is a case over the custody of a 10-year-old, the case continues for 10 to 15 years, and by then the child is an adult and has changed. According to some surveys done, among the most corrupt institutions in this country is the Registrar's Office of the Judiciary. I plan to work in a manner that brings all the people of all races together to be bound by our constitution. These are the challenges that we must overcome. I will appear on behalf of any decision taken by the government and the Cabinet of Ministers. First, I will take about 2 weeks to review the state of this ministry and put in place a program. For this program, I will seek and then take the assistance of all parties, including the Attorney General's Department.
A group including lawyers took part in the duty assumption ceremony. Is the Sri Lanka Freedom Party frustrated? This is what the General Secretary of the party, State Minister Dayasiri Jayasekara, had to say about this.
We all joined hands and formed one alliance to bring President Gotabaya Rajapaksa into power. We have not at any time worked to align the SLFP with anyone else. We will, however, do all that we can to preserve the identity of our party within this alliance. The SLFP has become the third force in Parliament. If not for the SLFP supporters, there would have not been a Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. We nominated 4 names for the nationalist seats. We hope that the nominations will be given to our party in the given order of the names. We were asked to send 2 names. We sent 4 names with the 2 preferred candidates at the top. Before the seats were announced, they could have asked us if 2 seats were being given, who should be given the seats, or if 1 seat is being awarded, who should be given that 1 seat. They did this without consulting us. This will become an internal issue in our party. It would have been better if they consulted us on who should be included in the national list. We are sad that they nominated the candidates to the national list seats without consulting us. We have to now be content with what we got back and work because we are not ready to inconvenience the government. We have been treated the same way Mahinda Rajapaksa was treated by Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga in 1994. So we will not panic because of this. We accept this challenge.
චන්ද්‍රිකා කුමාරතුංග මැතිණිය සැලකුවා වගේ සැලකිල්ලක් තමයි සලකලා තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒකට මම කලබල වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ අභියෝගය බාර ගන්න.
Dayasiri Jayasekara assumed duties as the State Minister of Batik, Handloom Fabrics and Local Apparel Products at the premises of the ministry located at the World Trade Center. Chairman of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, former President Maithripala Sirisena and other seniors of the party attended the event. Minister of Industries Vimal Veeravangsha also visited the premises of the ministry to congratulate State Minister Dayasiri Jayasekara. The State Minister also introduced a batik face mask at the event.
Minister Vimal Veeravangsha arrived at the State Minister Dayasiri Jayasekara's duty assumption ceremony after he himself assumed duties at the Ministry of Industry this morning. Minister Udaya Gammanpila and State Minister Dayasiri Jayasekara also participated in the event. The Ministry of Industry has the ability to strengthen the people of this country with better incomes and to help those drowning to stay afloat. Therefore, you have now been given this opportunity to strengthen the people of this country in the future.
His Excellency the President's objective is to remove the stumbling blocks that have been placed on the Executive President of the country by the 19th Amendment as soon as possible. It is essential to get rid of that issue at the beginning itself. Without stopping there, our hope is to expedite the task of bringing this country under a new constitution that empowers the people of the country.
නවාණ්ඩු ක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් යටතට මේ රට රැගෙනීමේ කාර්යයත් ඉතාම ඉක්මනින් සිදු කිරීම තමයි අපගේ අපේක්ෂාව වෙන්නේ.
Meanwhile, Minister Udaya Gammanpila assumed duties as the Minister of Energy today.
මේ වෙන විට ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ඉන්ධන අවශ්‍යතාවයෙන්
At present, only 20% of Sri Lanka's fuel requirement is refined in Sri Lanka. The remaining 80% is imported. I pledge to work to open 5 new refineries and to modernize the existing oil refineries over the next 5 years and to ensure national security through energy sufficiency. It is the policy of the government to keep utility prices as stable as possible.
මම ජාතියට ප්‍රතිඥාවක් දෙනවා මිල හැකිතාක් දුරට ස්ථාවර පවත්වා ගැනීම තමයි ආණ්ඩුවේ
අටුවල් බටු අපේ රටේ ඉබේට වැවෙනවා.
Yellow fruit nightshade grows all over the place in this country, but we still import it from overseas. Also, this cannabis is a medicine. Our country's environment is very conducive for cultivating cannabis. The cannabis that grows there is of very high standard and the illegal cultivations are set on fire by the police. Sometimes 10 or 15 acres. This is not very good. If they are confiscated, it should be taken to the Department of Medicine. They do such foolish things in our country. It is worthwhile if they can issue permits and allow this cultivation to be done legally. If we grow all the medicines that we can in the herbal gardens in the country, we can even look at making an income stream.
Ministers Bandula Gunawardena and Pavitra Vanyarachi were also present as Sisira Jayakodi, State Minister of Promotion of Indigenous Medicine, Development of Rural Ayurvedic Hospitals and Community Health, assumed his duties.
පොඩි තැනින් ආපු මිනිස්සෙක් විදියට පොඩි මිනිස්සුන්ට උදව් කරන්න මට
As someone who came from a small place, I will work to help innocent people who are of a similar situation. I will reassure the trust placed in me by the President and the Prime Minister is not misplaced by working to empower those in the industry. I am currently reviewing the subject.
අපිට ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. අපිව පරිශීලනය කරමින් මේ වෙලාවේ මම කටයුතු කරන්නේ.
Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa was also present as Minister Prasanna Ranawira assumed duties in his capacity as the State Minister of Cane, Brass, Clay, Furniture and Rural Industries.
The General Secretary of the Parliament has announced 2 appointments made by the governing party ahead of the meeting of Parliament next week.
The General Secretary of the Parliament of Sri Lanka has announced that Minister Dinesh Gunawardena has been appointed as the leader of the House of the Sri Lanka Parliament, while Minister Johnston Fernando has been appointed as the Chief Government Whip of the Sri Lanka Parliament. These positions were held by these respective ministers prior to the dissolution of Parliament on the 2nd of March.
The ministers of the government have been appointed and they are now in the process of assuming duties. Against such a backdrop, the statement made by the man dubbed as the architect of the modern-day Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, at his final Independence Day rally in 1990 still remains relevant even today. A United National Party member in the Kaluthara district went on a fast in front of the Sirikotha party headquarters this morning, claiming that he had been treated unfairly by the UNP.
Fazlan Feroz, a former Kaluthara urban councillor, engaged in this fast in front of the UNP headquarters at Sirikotha this morning. He engaged in this fast, claiming he emerged first from Kaluthara in the 2018 provincial council election, but did not get the post of mayor.
I was unfairly treated by Ranil's people. I'm not the only one who had to face such an injustice. There are others too. Ranil Wickremesinghe has suffered an insurmountable defeat at this election. But whenever you see, all they talk of is restructuring. But I haven't seen any restructuring taking place. You must respect the people's mandate. The people have decided. Now he's saying that he won't resign from the party leadership. He's saying that he will stay on until the provincial council election. This is becoming a joke now.
Meanwhile, an individual who was at the UMP headquarters at Sirikotha came outside and inquired about the injustice done to Feroz.
The ruling party secured a two-thirds majority at the general election. The United National Party should take the blame for this. They chased the most talented members away from the party and created a division by chasing the member who was given the authority to create an alliance upon the approval of its working committee. Approximately 10% of the population refrained from casting their vote, while a majority of them were our supporters. They refused to vote for the UNP because of Ranil Wickremesinghe, but since they were UNP loyalists, they did not want to vote for the telephone either. A large group got caught between two worlds and did not cast their vote. A majority of those siding with Ranil Wickremesinghe wants to join Sajith Premadasa, while a small group who still dreams about leading the party and country one day opposes both factions working together. No, we will go forward as the Samagi Jana Balawegaya. If they wish, they can request Sajith Premadasa to take over the leadership of the UNP. If so, we have no issue. He does not know how to bow down and give in. He is a senior leader. However, there is one issue that disappoints me even today, and that is there is no leader like Ranil Wickremesinghe in parliament at present. In my view, Ranil Wickremesinghe is the most suitable candidate to be elected as a nationalist MP. I support him. If I had the authority to do this, I would have sent the list by now.
The Kurunegala Municipal Council has decided to transfer, or rather pass on, the expenses of the destruction of a property with archaeological value and believed to be the King's Court of King Buanikaba to the residents of the area. The proposal made in this regard was approved with amendments today.
Interestingly, the Kurunegala mayor was on no-show at today's council meeting, and the session was presided over by the deputy mayor of Kurunegala, Sumit Udavasala. A proposal was put forward for 4.43 million to be released for legal expenses about the matter, and this includes the expenses for instituting legal action against the chairman of the All Ceylon Farmers Federation, Namal Karunaratne. The vote on the proposal took place after the Finance Committee convened, and approval was granted by 13 out of the 16 council members present to release the funds. However, it does not include the expenses for legal action taken against the chairman of the All Ceylon Farmers Federation, Namal Karunaratne. Accordingly, the approved amount to be released is Rs 2.18 million. The JVP member of the council, Ranuk Sanjay, strongly opposed the use of taxpayers' money to cover legal expenses. UNP council member Sumedha Arunashanta and SLPP council member Gamini Peramunage opposed the resolution, citing no recommendations were obtained from the legal committee. However, all 5 other UNP council members present for today's sessions supported the resolution. A total of 2.18 million rupees was passed by the council, but now that cost too has been passed on to the people. Earlier, the Secretary to the Ministry of Buddha Sasana and Cultural and Religious Affairs, Bandula Harishchandra, speaking to News First, said the restoration and renovation of the site is estimated to cost Rs 9 million. He added that letters addressed to the Road Development Authority and the Kurnagala Municipal Council to make financial contributions towards covering the renovation cost have been sent. However, it is reported the Kurnagala MC is yet to act on the request made. On the 12th of August, the Court of Appeal issued an order not to enforce the warrants issued for the arrest of Tushara Sanjeeva Vitarana, the Kurnagala mayor, and 5 others until the 24th of August.
A laboratory employee of the Government Analyst Department has been arrested for the possession of heroin in the Aturugiriya area.
The laboratory worker was arrested in the Morutua Hena area in Aturugiriya while travelling on a motorbike. The raid was carried out based on a tip-off received by the Aturugiriya police, and 18 grams and 730 milligrams of heroin were found in his possession. The 28-year-old laboratory worker is a resident of Matara. Interrogations revealed that another person was involved in the racket, and a special police team commenced investigations today in search of the suspect. Our correspondent stated that the arrested suspect was produced before the Kaduwala Magistrates Court today, and the police were allowed to detain him until the 24th for questioning. Meanwhile, 5 more suspects have been arrested with heroin in several parts of the island. The police stated the suspects were arrested in Horagollagama, Modara Garden, Soizapura, Maligawata and Mount Lavinia.
And that's a wrap of Primetime News for tonight. Coming up next is Face the Nation. For the News First team, I'm Dasnia Tauda, along with our interpreter tonight, Taraka Gabriel. Good night.